What is up? It's Figure Hunter. We are at a little bit darker hour than normal, so it is dusk. The sun is coming down, so I apologize for the light fading, but I wanted to do a review specifically talking about the primary differences between the Forerunner 165, the Vivoactive 5, the Forerunner 265, and the Venu 3, because there are actually some profound differences when you look at these watches, and it doesn't stand out. I see it all the time on the Garmin, posts on Facebook, like, hey, I like the Venu 2 or the Venu 3, or I like the Vivoactive 5, and there are starkly different capabilities when it comes to the Vivoactive 5 versus the 165 versus the Venu 3 versus the 265. And I wanted to break down a simple summary. So this is not exhaustive. This is not looking at every ins and outs, and it's really primarily not looking at like the visual differences of how they look as watches, like the appearance differences in some regard. So at the bottom end of the cost structure, you have both the Forerunner 165 and the Vivoactive 5. So basically in that $250 to $300 range. And then at the top end of the structure, you've had at $450, the 265, Forerunner 265, and the Venu 3. And you think, oh man, look at the Venu 3. It's got more capabilities when it comes to, it's got the ECG, it's got more aspects when it comes to what the sensor can do, as far as it's got a more accurate heart rate sensor. It's got the Elevate 5.0, which has ECG and skin temperature. But when you look at the breakdown of some of the details, there are huge or bigger differences between the 265 and all the rest of them on the training side. So this is the thing that I always say, is that you really should not look at the Vivoactive series or the Venu series if you want the full breadth of capabilities of Garmin's training capabilities, training analysis capabilities, because therein lies the difference. Now, let's talk about like the simple difference when it comes to some of the design features. So the Vivoactive 5 and the 165 have a 1.2 inch screen. So they're all gonna be like light watches. I'm not gonna get into the grams and the differences there. But the Vivoactive 5 and the Garmin Forerunner 165 have a 1.2 inch screen. The 265 has a 1.3 inch screen, and the Venu 4, I would probably argue, has the largest screen for the body size of anything that Garmin sells at 1.4 inches. Again, you could jump to the 965, which is a $600, training watch, Forerunner series watch from Garmin, and that would have a 1.4 inch screen as well. But on the on the Venu 3, you have a 1.4 inch screen, a very small body, I think 46 millimeters. So going down the chain, you have like 45 millimeters on the 265, and then somewhere between 42 and 43 millimeters on the Vivoactive 5 and the Forerunner 165. So on paper, it looks like, oh, these are sort of similar in the $250 to $300 range and in the $450 range. And I'm not going to get into all the maybe more nuanced differences, but the training difference is the main thing when it comes to what they do. So at the base level, they all will give you some sort of recovery time from the workout. So, sorry, getting in some dark areas now. So recovery time is one piece of Garmin's training analysis. And the 165, not the Vivoactive 5, not the Venu 3, gives you a little bit more insight into the impact of your workout when it evaluates your training effect, like the type of impact you might have had on your body physiologically from that one workout. And the 165 also includes that training effect, which is categorized by the aerobic impact and the anaerobic impact from that one workout. So it adds one little minor layer. But all three, the Venu 3, the Vivoactive 5, and the Forerunner 165, lack a training load tracking and an in-depth training analysis over a long period of time. So they don't give you a load score, which is sort of like the true total impact of that workout on your cardiovascular system, and it doesn't compare your load volume of this 1 week relative to your last 4 weeks. It doesn't give you a ratio of how hard you're pushing it this week versus the last 4 weeks to show if you're pushing your fitness higher or declining or maintaining, as well as it doesn't give you an analysis of what types of workouts you've been doing more of lately and less of lately, whether it's anaerobic, sort of your sprint work, whether it's high intensity type work, or whether it's low intensity type work. So all of those are under Garmin's advanced training analytics, and all of those are under the training load tracking and training load analysis, only available on the Garmin Forerunner 265. None of that is on the Venu 3. None of that is on the Vivoactive 5. None of that is on the Forerunner 165. So all of that training load tracking, analysis, detail about your broad impact of your efforts in the last weeks versus the past weeks is only on the 265, and it's not obvious. It's not widely known or widely mentioned when it comes to when somebody's making recommendations for what Garmin watch. It's sort of like, I like this one. They all have big, pretty screens. This one's got the biggest one, and it's got a metal bezel versus a plastic casing only. So that's what you would be tempted to think when you see the Venu 3. And then the last thing that the 265 has that all of the others do not have is training status, where it gives you a recommendation of how a culmination of multiple aspects of your training from this week versus multiple weeks back is giving you a recommendation for here's the summary of sleep, how much recovery time you need from your last hard workouts, how your training load has been this week versus the past 4 weeks. And it culminates together into a training status, and a status that sort of says you are pushing it, you're ready for a race, you're peaking, you're in recovery, whatever it is. But it takes, I think it's 6 or 8 physiological metrics of your training focused areas and summarizes it in a directionable format only on the Garmin Forerunner 265. And then, obviously the watch is above that. Additionally, it does the training readiness, which takes into account a bunch of your recovery physiological data, coupled with your training physiological data, namely if you've had a hard workout recently and your training load recently, coupled with your sleep and your recovery, and gives you a recommendation for how ready you are for a hard workout that day. None of that is on the 265. It's all on the 265. None of that is on the 165, the Venu 3, or the Vivoactive 5. Now, in quick summary, what do they all include? They all include Garmin's wealth of wellness and recovery on the baseline side, not the training side, but the recovery aspects that Garmin offers. So your body battery, which is a culmination of your minute-by-minute HRV and your stress evaluated from that HRV, your sleep score, your sleep coach, nap tracking, your HRV nightly, of course, your nightly HRV evaluation and how that appears to look with your recovery, whether your body's recovered or not, or whether it's got a sickness that's come on, all those wellness things. So the way I would see it is if you want a high quality, polished, really great watch for wellness, and you don't care about any of the training stuff, then you would focus on the Venu 3, because that's the highest quality, best sensor, most comprehensive, that doesn't include the training stuff. If you wanted the most budget friendly that included training that has no training stuff, you go to the Vivoactive 5. And if you want a little bit more training, just a little bit, you go to the 165. And again, I have a whole review of the 165 versus the 265 just to give you a summary there. So check that out, link in the description below. But I had to break down the differences of all these 4 watches at different price points in primary format. Again, not the nuanced differences. Yes, you can get, for $250, you can get the 165 without music. For $300, which is the exact correlation to the Vivoactive 5, you can get music on both. Either one have music. Vivoactive 5 automatically comes with music. So outside of the nuances, you're getting all the beauty of Garmin's wellness tracking. Their sleep tracking, their nightly HRV, their body battery, which looks at you, minute by minute. But a stark difference in the training tracking. And you need to know that when you're going to look at a watch, because if you are going to a Garmin and you do any kind of, more consistent training, and training is important to you, then you have to look at the 265. You have to look at the Garmin Forerunner 265 and not look at the 165, Vivoactive 5, and Venu 3. And side note, the 265 is the only one that does multi-sport triathlon tracking and has some other nuances built into it for that, as well as just a culmination of other things. So check out the 165 versus 265 review. It's a Figure Hunter. Thanks so much for watching.